Today, we are going to be thinking a little bit more about a series that we're jumping into right now. So we're jumping into a series called Resilient, which I'm pretty pumped about. And it's going to focus a lot on how we're doing in our souls, right? Now, this is an interesting idea, though, because I think a lot of us, we don't really think about our souls very often. And we definitely don't think that they can get beat up, or that they can be depressed, or that they can be stressed, or anything like that, right? I don't know that we think that way a lot, and I don't, right? I'll just straight up tell you, I don't really think about that very often. But doing this book, or reading this book first, Resilient, by John Eldredge, and then turning it into a sermon series has been really helpful for me. And here's why. Because John Eldredge thinks way different than I do, in a really helpful way, because he thinks like a psalmist, John does, and he writes in a way that for me is like, I don't know, that feels touchy-feely. But when I really step back and I think about what he's saying, and I think about how he's saying it, he really is trying to get in touch with the heart of God. And that can be a weird thing, especially for those of us that are maybe a little less emotional or like in touch with our emotions. We can be like, getting in touch with the heart of God, what's that even mean? Exactly, because I have felt that. And so by reading this book and then trying to think through the Psalms, it's like, okay, well, what does that mean, right? King David and Asaph and the sons of Korah and all these guys that were in Moses and Solomon, the guys that were writing these Psalms, they were seeking to really understand and be in touch with the heart of God. Like they wanted to be in step with what the Spirit of God was doing in them and through them in the midst of all kinds of stuff, good and bad stuff. And so that, I think, is really helpful for us as we think about the last 3 years. Okay? And then not even the last 3 years, because I'm recording this now in light of COVID and everything that we've come through. It's 2023. We're kind of over COVID, kind of not, and then, but what happened before then? What happened before COVID? Well, we were running ourselves ragged, right? Our souls were being depleted. And so then we get into COVID, and we're totally not prepared for that emotionally. And man, we just got steamrolled, right? There was so much tension happening culturally anyway. And so many of us were just pushed to the limit of our energy, of our like emotional capacity. Physically, we were worn out. I've talked to so many people lately, and I've just told them over the last 5 years, I remember seeing this transition of, hey, how you doing? To like, oh, I'm doing pretty good, blah, 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 this and that, to all of a sudden, hey, how you doing? Oh, busy. That became the new good or the new normal. And that's what everybody was responding with all the time. And then COVID just slammed into us and we were just strung out. We were all so busy. So this series, though, is like, okay, so in light of all that, how do we get back in touch with the heart of God? How can I find resiliency that I absolutely need? How can you find the peace and the hope that Jesus Christ talked about so much? It was promised in the Old Testament. It was promised in the New Testament. So pre-Jesus on earth, during Jesus on earth, and then post-Jesus on earth in the Bible, you have this promise of hope and peace and resiliency that I think we've all lost. Like we don't, even as Christians, right? Even if you're watching this as a Christian, it's like, well, how do I tap into that? That's what this series is about. That's what this book is about. Like, how do we actually tap into that stuff? So, as a precursor to the message, if you're watching this ahead of time, or even if you're watching this just later, I realize this material that we put out is evergreen, right? It's just always going to be out there. Here's what I'd like you to do. Go check out Psalm 42. Go check out Psalm 43 and look at just the way that the psalmist feels. Like really try to put yourself in his shoes to how he is feeling in the moment, where the attacks are coming from, how his soul just feels beat up. And he says that, right? As the deer panteth for the water, so my soul longs after you, Lord. And depending on the translation you use, it might say heart. But the Hebrew word there is actually nephesh. soul. And that soul keeps getting repeated over and over and over and over. And then in the New Testament, in John 12, verse 27, Jesus, who's creator and savior, even he says his soul is in anguish, right? Because he knows what's coming. He's staring at the crucifixion, right? He's staring at the cross not too much longer after that time in John chapter 12. So how can our souls be in anguish? How can our souls be tired? How can we be in the midst of struggle and difficulty and everything else that's going to go on in life and still find peace and hope and resiliency? That, I think, is what we need to look at in the coming weeks. But for today, since you're watching this now or listening to this now, it's about leaning into God. Like really, genuinely leaning into God and asking for his strength and making sure that our hope is actually only in him, not just in relief. Like, Lord, I need more than relief. I need what my soul is built for. And that's a tough turn to make. That's tough, right? Because that's a completely different way of thinking. But I want to put it to you that I think that's what our souls need. Like, we really need to dive deep with God. So I'm excited to look at how we do that over the next 6 weeks. And I hope even as you're watching or listening to this, you'll check out those 2 Psalms and you'll notice what the psalmist is yearning for and where his heart keeps going back to. It's a roller coaster ride, but check it out because I think a lot of us can identify with how he feels. But I hope you'll join us on Sundays as we jump into this series to really think more clearly and think more deeply about how we connect with the heart of God, which can seem like a really weird and difficult thing to do, but I'm excited about the journey. So thanks for checking in today. If this was helpful in any way for you or thought-provoking in any way for you, would you please share it? Would you please like it, comment, whatever the case may be, because that really does help us just to get the hope of God, the hope of Christ out to different people. All right, so we'll catch you next time. Until then, God bless you.